Hello, I'm going to introduce you to some of my retro stock, give you an idea what used to happen in the 1970s, 80s and 90s. So first of all, I've got my trial lenses and I'm going to show you the trial lenses. So here I have a -125. You can see how it minifies everything. So as I've got it now over my chin, you can see how it makes my chin look smaller. This is called a full aperture lens. With the full aperture, that means that when it goes into the trial frame, the whole of the lens is in front of the eye and not just a small amount. A bit later on, they brought out small aperture lenses. Now this particular one is a -7. Now you can see this minifies everything a lot. Now the trial lenses are actually made of glass. Modern trial lenses now for doing the eye test are made of plastic, so they would sound a lot different. The whole point of the glass lenses was to give the best clear vision that they could possibly give you, to get it more accurate. But they've done so much work on plastic lenses now that it doesn't need to be glass anymore. Here we have the Maddox Rod. The Maddox Rod is for eye muscle action, to see how well the eye muscles are working. You can see it's like a prism effect on them. We also have a slot. This is so that somebody with large pupils can actually look through this slot and focus a little bit easier onto the item. I'm going to get out now a minus sill and a plus sill. Now a sill doesn't correct the vision in all parameters, it corrects it in one direction. So as I put this up close, you can see now as I move it, you can see the image changes as I'm moving the lens around. In this particular instance, the image is slightly smaller. Now we go on to the plus lens, again on a sill. Now this is very distorted, and as I move this you can see much more distortion. The image is a lot bigger. Moving on to a normal plus lens, and again this time it's correcting it in all directions or in all meridians. And again as I move it now, you don't see the distortion change, but you can see that everything is so much bigger. Here I have my retro trial frame. This is rather old. It's got to be at least 50 years old. It's fully adjustable on the bridge. It has a metal pad for putting on your nose. Not the most comfortable thing to wear, but it did its job. And you can change the pupil distance measurement on it. So as I'm winding this now, this is actually widening the frame. You've got the frame adjustable height. This is so that you can get the nose pads, this metal nose pad set at the right height, so that when this is actually worn, the lenses will be sitting straight in front of the eyes. So as I put on a lens, it would slot in at the front. And that's how it would work. You would first of all occlude the lens, So imagine this is in it. This is a retro occluder. Now I can't see with this because that's nothing like my prescription, but you would occlude the lens. So these were made of steel. They're not quite as adjustable as a modern day trial frame, but they certainly did the job at the time when it was needed. With this now, this occluder, you'll notice it's got lots of holes in. It's called the pinhole, and that would be put in front of the eye, and actually somebody who couldn't normally see would actually look through that and could probably read something on a chart which, like that, they wouldn't be able to read. In the 1970s and 80s, these particular items are glass lenses that were taken out of some frames from the 70s and 80s. You'll see they are glass. One's glass actually. Them two are definitely glass, and you'll notice that this particular one is a round segment bifocal. Just here you've got the bifocal lens. Now that would be measured to see what size bifocal it is. I know this particular one is around 24 segment bifocal. That means when you've got the full circle, across the center of the circle you would measure it as 24 millimeters. It is then cut down the lenses to the correct height in the frame, so your lens may not be 24 millimeters in width, but it started at that. But that would give you your reading segment, and this would be your distance segment. In the earlier days, this one is a larger segment bifocal, and this was actually a 35mm segment bifocal. This is actually cut, the bottom half is actually below the width of the diameter, so below the center of the circle, so you could easily measure that one, and that would be 35mm. They didn't used to do much in the way of, in the early days there weren't any varifocals, so they used bifocals, trifocals and single vision to do all the correction. Computers weren't so prevalent, they were only just coming out, and you wouldn't need the intermediate distance anywhere near as often, so the trifocal would just be a thin strip above the top of the reading section, and that would be the intermediate. Now moving on from that, I also have here a handheld Maddox rod. Now the handheld Maddox rod does the same job, but I have more control of this, as I can now move this by hand, and I can get this wherever I want it and the angle I can best use it. When it comes to measuring the lenses, they now have digital photometers to measure the power of the lens. In the old days you used a manual photometer, but they weren't always easy to get at, so what you had is a lens measure, and you'll notice this lens measure has got 3 prongs and it's got all the circles at the back. If I use one trial lens, and with this trial lens, if I was to push this against the front surface, you will notice though this is a 425 trial lens, but you'll notice it doesn't measure as 4.25, it measures as something totally different. It measures as 2.12. If I turn this over and measure, this side will measure the same, minus 2.12. So of course you add them together, they become minus 4.25. So it's all about measuring the front and the back surface together. Moving on, another retro item I have a retro Thermoscope. Now this Thermoscope is battery operated. It was before they had fully electric ones, and so the battery compartment is here. Quite big batteries. I think they're D size batteries. It would take two. You'd screw them in. Now there's an on-off switch here, and you've got power adjustment across here. If I turn it that way, you can see it moving better, and that you can see it if you look at the hole, flipping the lenses round so that you get different magnifications. It's got two lenses, one is here, the other one is at an angle. This is so that you can look through and observe the eye, and take a look through with the extra magnification. You can look into the back of the eye, and it would be illuminated as well. Right, the next thing is retro frames. I have here a nice, very small metal case, and in that I have this rimless frame. Now the first thing you'll notice, there's no sides on it. It's got a nice bridge. This is a precious metal, it is a gold frame. It has pads that are flexible, so you'd clip that onto your nose. Now that's great to clip that onto your nose. It's not always convenient to carry the case. You've actually got a wire with a groove, with a loop. That loop would come onto your ear, and you can just carry it hanging down if you wanted to, so that it's ready for you to use as and when you need it. This one would have been about the 1920s, just after the First World War. Now again, I've got another slimline case. This, although this is an antique frame, this is probably about more like 1945 to 1950, around that sort of time. You have two sides, they're curl sides. They've got a joint here, which is two screws, and you have to undo both to be able to pop the lens out. It has a bridge, doesn't have nose pads. That bridge sits directly onto your nose. This is actually precious metal, it's silver. It's showing its age a little bit now, but that would sit on your nose, and because of that material, and because there's no joints or anything, it's very, very comfortable. This is an early example of what I would call a sports frame. It's a very small lens shape. Again, it's a precious metal. This is 14 karat gold. It has the same sort of bridge as the last frame, where there's no pads or anything like that. The precious metal sits onto your nose, and because of them being precious metals, they're hypoallergenic. The small lens shape, because they're glass lenses, would help to keep the weight down, and you'll notice that they're very straight sides. They would slide on nice and comfortable, but you've got loops at the end of the sides, and you would actually fasten a cord onto that, and that would hold it onto your head, so that if you was doing athletics or anything, you're running about, the glasses will not fall off. This is a little bit later on. This is actually a Savile Row frame. It's 14 karat rolled gold with 22 karat gold plating. It's actually a rimless pair. It's fastened on just by one screw. Although you can see there's a frame coming around it, that's actually not fastened onto the lens at all. So that's all that's holding this on. Even the sides are not attached to this lens. You've got pads here, which are again a precious metal pad. So they're hypoallergenic. The bridge itself doesn't rest on your nose, just the pads do. It's one of the earlier hockey end sides, or drop end sides as we call them now. So you can see here it comes up, down, and that rests on the top of your ear. When people used to go to the cinema or the theatre, probably the theatre was more accurate, they would have something like this. That would be hung on a chain around your neck and folded, so it looks very much like a pendant with a piece of glass in it. But actually that unfolds and it now becomes your theatre glasses. And you'll notice that it loops at the top, but actually the bottom is there, and you would just hold that up in front, and that would help you to either read the program, or it may be that they're distance and they help you to look at it, magnify on the stage. This one isn't actually a precious metal. It's quite a late example of this particular type of frame. That again is about the 1930s, 1940s, probably the 40s, just after the Second World War. Now we're coming on to something, I've shown you these before. I've got 4 examples of real tortoise or turtle shell frames. They are all made differently. They can't be used as ophthalmic frames anymore. Due to the materials used. We don't want to be killing turtles, so these are just examples of ones that were already left. I'm pointing this one out first because this is what's called a half glaze. You'll notice these little prongs sticking out. The lens would actually be made to slot into there, and that would be your reading material. The top bit would be left completely blank. There would be no lens in it. So this was a very early type of bifocal, and in fact I think this was 3 shillings and 6pence when it was brand new, to give you an idea. They're worth a lot more than that now, and that has got a drop end side. It has got metal fastenings, because without the metal fastenings they would become very brittle and they wouldn't last very long due to the temperature of our skin and also the salt that we perspire. Now moving on to the next one, this is another example. Now you'll notice this is a lighter coloured turtle shell. Now the lighter the colour, the better the quality of the material. So although this one is less of a special frame, this was probably much later on that this was made. Being a lighter material, it might be worth more than the one with the half glaze. So again, metal joints, because of keeping the strength up, because you don't want them to break. Now this one would be a much lower quality. This is a much darker frame. So this is one of the cheapest versions of the turtle shell. Incidentally, the turtle shell that they used was the hornbill turtle, which is now a rare breed. It's an endangered species. This particular one has got lengthy sides. They're called wraparound sides, and they would just slide on, and rest. They don't drop behind your ears, they just rest across the top of your head. The bridge is very basic, and you'll have seen when I put that on that that's actually quite a good fit for me. And then the last one, this one again is quite a good quality one. It's a nice light coloured one. It's got a keyhole bridge. This is designed so it'll fit almost everybody on the nose, due to its design. Again, with all of the turtle shells, they've got the metal joints. And this one again is a drop end side. The one thing you will notice, all of them have got quite small eye sizes because they're glass lenses that are being used. The reason for the smaller size, the lenses are very, very heavy, and so you're reducing the weight by reducing the size of the lens.